So we're going to talk about now what I perceive to be one of the hardest heroes in the game. Um, Everybody knows how he works. Everybody knows he does a lot of damage in worgen form. Everybody knows he has Go for the Throat and Cursed Bullet, which works against Deathwing and all these things. But a lot of people try and fit him into normal comps. Even I, at times, struggle with Greymane. He's a very hard hero to play. He's hard to play because of all the counters, because you can get a lot of auto attack damage from your human form, but we all know the real value is hopping into worgen. But the hardest part is knowing when to hop into worgen. A lot of people just go full YOLO and they die and they get some damage in and it looks good, but then they have 5 or 6 deaths. They might have a few kills and they think, well, I traded. And at that point, you're basically saying, like, I traded my life for somebody else's, therefore theirs is more valuable. And that's not always the circumstance. And so Greymane walks a very fine line of when do I engage, how do I engage, and how do I build. He's tough because there's so many blinds between Johanna, different ways to control him. Arthas is a really good counter if you pick Greymane too early. And so there, it makes it hard again to go into worgen form, because once you go into worgen form, like, your damage is actually less because you're attacking slower. Not only that, but you're also taking damage. So we're going to talk about some of the playstyles with Greymane, maybe some of the different reasons why you would pick different talents, but also more of the default build to try and figure out how you want to play Greymane. But I can tell you from the outset right now is that you should probably be pressing E half as much as you're already pressing it. I cannot stress that enough. Now, one thing is very apparent is that Greymane, a lot of people don't realize this. In human form, he has some of the highest auto attack damage in the game. They buffed it a few months before this video to about 150 something baseline. So I think at level 1, it's around 160. For comparison, Rainer's about 100. Cassia's about 130. Hanzo's about 200, but his is infinitely slower. Actually, I think his is a little less than that now. But either way, you can see there's a varying degree of how strong his auto attack is. And I want to put that into your head now that Greymane has a very high human auto attack, and that's okay to play around. That is 100% okay to play around. You are the executioner, right? You need to have somebody on your team that can also help you get kills. If you're playing with a Li Ming, getting a kill, getting a reset helps everybody out in that situation. So we're going to talk about some of the talents and how to get there, but more importantly, I need you to understand that you need to stay in human form more than you already are. And sometimes that sucks because you're going to take a huge hit on your DPS, but you're going to have potential more impact in other situations later in the game, and you have to know when you should try and engage and when you should dive the backline and how to feel comfortable doing it. So at level 1, there's really one that sets itself apart, and that's viciousness. Inner Beast's duration goes to 4 seconds, and this is basically how your entire hero is going to function. If you don't have Inner Beast up, it is a painful, painful situation to play Greymane. You want to be able to auto attack as much as you can in human form while keeping your Inner Beast up so that you can start to whittle away, start to set up kills. You have to be very patient. He's very quick at finishing, but very slow at getting there individually, unless you hop into worgen form, which, again, go back to what we're talking about. Viciousness gives you that forgiveness factor to where you have 4 seconds now, which is actually pretty generous, and your ability damage is also going to help refresh this duration. So this helps a lot in terms of keeping Inner Beast alive, using different ways to utilize this, and it's kind of like using Vala's Hatred. You'd like to be at max Hatred, just like you'd like to have Inner Beast up. So you need to know, like, do I use this to open a team fight? Do I wait a few seconds to get in a team fight? And this is one of the hard decisions you have to make. It's okay not to use this. If you know that there's a lot of minions around, or you're on Infernal Shrines where you're going to have something to auto attack and stuff to throw your cocktail off of, viciousness now makes sense. If you just have a solo frontliner that's a Johanna or a Muradin or somebody that's going to stand there but then has the capabilities of walking away or moving away, and your Inner Beast is no longer there and you don't have anything else to attack, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, like, I can't do anything. Viciousness gives you that forgiveness factor, but you also need to watch your surroundings, be very aware of, is this a full-on team fight? Can I pop it early? Is this just a poking team fight to see if somebody's going to bite? Now, if you're really, really pro, you're going to know, like, is Greymane there? And alternatively, if you're playing against a Greymane and you keep getting poked and poked and poked and poked, and it's fast auto attacks, just walk away. Once that Inner Beast is down, Greymane's a far less hero. Now, Perfect Aim, they've buffed Cocktail Build a bit lately. I still think it's got a viable place. I don't think it's bad. It gives you a little bit of a hybrid build to have auto attacks, have some splash damage, which also helps you enable setting up to get kills. And so for that, Gildan's Cocktail's range, but it's more about the mana return. But even then, I don't think you necessarily need to worry about this. You can go into this. I think Viciousness is pretty much where it's always going to be at. Wolfheart is if you're already a Greymane main and you know how to play around Inner Beast and you know how to be able to do these different things. I don't think Wolfheart's really there. Viciousness, kind of the strong one. Perfect Aim, you don't necessarily have to go into Cocktail Build if you do this, but it's going to be the reason why you would go into this. You can go into this. You don't even have to go into this if you're going Cocktail at 7. Don't forget that, is you don't have to do that. But either way, Viciousness, really good. Now, at level 4, you actually have 2 very good talents, and they both kind of fit in differently. Using Dark Flight grants 50 physical armor against the next 2 basic attacks while in worgen form. So you're already going to have 10 armor when you go in. Obviously, that's going to help against spell damage, but you'll have 50 armor, when you go in. 10 armor, basically everything. But when you have 50 physical armor when you go in, that helps out a lot overall, because now you can go in. But if you're going against like a Kael'thas or something to where you're not really worried about the auto attacks and you're more about like, if I get into a situation, how can I get out? Physical armor doesn't necessarily help you get out all the time. It can help you get in, stay in for a couple of extra seconds before you have to start considering going out. I don't think you never really want to engage with your E, hop into worgen form, and then stay there for a long period of time unless you have a group that supports that, namely a Kharazim material, or the enemy team's just not focusing you, which does make things more interesting because it means like, ooh, I get more value as Greymane. This is a lot cooler now. But if you're not worried about auto attackers on the other side, if they don't have a Raynor, a Zul'jin, a Vala, anything like that, Eyes in the Dark is good. It still can be good no matter what. You don't necessarily need the physical armor against those types of heroes, but it surely helps. But Eyes in the Dark allows you to disengage and then also get to safety, and this is going to pair well with some of your later talents because this now gives you the ability to maybe toe that line a little bit more, to stay in there a little bit longer so that when you come out, you can't be targeted right away. They'll still see where you're going, but you can't be targeted right away, and it allows you to kind of play with your health pool a little bit. Use that health pool, but then use the stealth as a mode to say go in. I think these are going to be the de facto. Anything here is not exactly that great. You're not normally going to have mana issues as Greymane, but both of these are good. But Eyes in the Dark will always be good. Thick Skin is more of a situational depending on the enemy team. Level 7. Now, this is the one where everybody wants to have fun, right? The basic one you should be considering every single game is Quicksilver Bullets. Now, go back to what I said in the beginning, right? In the beginning, you have some of the highest auto attack damage in the game in human form. In human form. We all know you're going to have it in worgen form, but in human form, now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. I have extra 1.1 range. What does that mean, right? It means I can keep my inner beast up more often because I have that increased time with viciousness, but I can also poke from a greater distance. I don't necessarily have to play in a dangerous position because now I can play with longer auto attack range. I can complement my inner beast. I can play around all the different things that I have. Quicksilver Bullets allows you to trade out with most auto attackers in the game or most other ranged heroes in the game because their ability range can get you, but you can dodge that. And you can find different ways around that, but you can also trade out. There's very few heroes that have this type of auto attack range. If you're going against a Tracer, for example, this works incredibly well. You outrange Tracer by a mile at this point, and you can just auto attack her down. Dare her to come in. You can only trade a couple of auto attacks with a Greymane before he hops in worgen form. So if you're going against a Tracer, if you're going against something that's going to even be diving, this can still work good because you can outrange them. This also allows you to poke tanks. This allows you to keep your inner beast active. And I cannot continue to stress this enough. Your inner beast is what separates you from a good hero and a bad hero. And if you drop your inner beast because you spent too much time dancing around and you couldn't find anybody to auto attack or you're just out of range, you know what that feels like. Yeah, you can hop into worgen form. You're going to get 2 or 3 autos. And the next thing you know, I got to get out of here. I don't have increased attack speed. I can't get that 4th, 5th auto attack, which is the difference between 500, 600, 700 more damage onto a target because I don't have my Inner Beast. And that's something you got to consider on why Quicksilver Bullets is so good. There's a whole lot of reasons why this is good, but I'm giving you that thought process of simplify things. Make sure that you're using something like this because this is going to help you. Everything else here is super appealing. Everybody wants more damage. Everybody wants to be like, I'm going to stack out of my mind. I'm going to do a ton of damage with Wizened Duelist. There is a time and a place for this. Once you get good with Greymane, and then also when the other team doesn't have a lot of CC and blinds, because this means that if they don't have a lot of stuns, a lot of CC, if I'm going against a Garrosh, for example, I don't exactly always want to hop in there and hop into worgen form versus a Garrosh. That's pretty bad for most people. Arthas as well. Yes, it can help. Yes, it gets there. Remember, you're going to lose half of this if you die. And as a Greymane, if you can go an entire game without dying, bless you, you're a fantastic player, and you probably don't even need to be watching this. But at some point, you're going to toe that line, and it's not always going to work out, but you'll have moments where this could be good. Same for Elixir. They've buffed Elixir to the point where it does help because now it allows you to have more cooldown reduction. It reduces the base cooldown, which means that you can hopefully stack this a little bit quicker. Remember, it's about hitting the people with the splash, not the initial. Another thing to remember about Cocktail is that the initial hit actually doesn't hardly do any damage. It's the splash damage. So if you have a kill target, you need to be looking at splashing it onto them and not actually hitting them with the Cocktail unless they're literally one hit away from dying. So always remember that with your Cocktail is that it's about splashing the damage onto them. So using a minion as opposed to a hero to make sure and hit more heroes normally treat you a little bit better. I think Elixir's okay. This can, again, set you up to be the finisher. You're going to pepper things down. You're going to auto attack, but then you're going to hit with that splash damage. And this does hit very strong late game. Like, once you finish this quest, it's actually a lot of damage. It's just a matter of getting there. So it increases it up to 300. So this is pretty satisfying when you finish it. But I would say try out Quicksilver Bullets for a while. Get the hang of Greymane before you start trying to experiment with Wizened Duelist and Elixir. Teams that Elixir does work against is if you're going against like a triple ranged, things that you're going to have trouble diving onto or stepping forward versus auto attacking against. If you're on Infernal Shrines, you can splash this onto the minions. You can do a lot of things with Elixir. That's your form of trading out with other ranged minions. Just remember, this is single target, but it's more AoE ability as well because it does go out in a cone. So these are things to consider. But Quicksilver Bullets, think about what you're doing with that overall just by keeping Inner Beast active. That's far more valuable than anything else you can get here. 2 to 3 extra auto attacks is the same amount of damage as what you're getting from Elixir. Remember that. So if you don't have Inner Beast, it doesn't matter. Level 10. Now this is a really, really interesting discussion because Go for the Throat allows you to do a lot of damage, reset your abilities. They made some changes to this at level 20. To reset that. This ability can be used a second time if you do get a kill with this. There's little skull and crossbones above their head to know like when they're killable with it. This is always going to be good. You don't even have to get a kill with this. I want you to remember that is that you can do a lot of different things to get in here. Is that you can hop into worgen form. You can get in, you can disengage out, and then you can immediately hop back into worgen form with your Go for the Throat because this does put you into worgen form, and there's different ways to engage, disengage, and then instantly re-engage and try and get there. There's some cool plays you can make. Overall, I think it's pretty straightforward on what Go for the Throat does. Is this okay to use as an opener? 100%, because just remember, this is still a lot of damage. It's slightly more than a base Flame Strike. But if I know that I don't need to necessarily snowball and make the one-man highlight reel, is that I don't need to get the reset. I don't need to do all this stuff. I can help my team and get started on things. And I don't mean open this up on 100% target. Don't get me wrong. You never want to use it that way. What I'm saying is somebody's at 50% health. You can use this to get into worgen form and then do the damage. And you're going to get that. And then maybe 1 or 2 more autos and a swipe and then they're dead. Those are things to consider with Go for the Throat. Obviously, if you find a low health target, you can get in. It puts you into worgen form. We'll talk about a few of the abilities in terms of things you can do in worgen form to maybe survive a little bit longer. We'll talk about that in a second. Cursed Bullet, everybody knows the strength, 40% of their current health. Who does this work well against? It works well against basically everybody, regardless of whether they're a tank or not. Do you pad your stats a little bit more against tanks? Absolutely. But This does help quite a bit, as we've got a cat aggro here. This does help quite a bit in opening, right? If I have a Diablo standing in front of me, if I have a Deathwing, everybody knows it's going to work against Deathwing. A Garage, where percentage damage does do well. I can open up on these targets, and now they have to make their decisions quite a bit quicker. If they go from 100% health to 60% health, if they go from 90 to 50, something around that nature, right? All of a sudden, it wouldn't be 50, it'd be like 50 something, right? Now all of a sudden, like, they have to make very different decisions based off of their health pool, and that gives my team an advantage. And this is on a very generous cooldown. It's a 30-second cooldown. So there's a lot of different things you can utilize this for, and also keep in mind you shift into human to fire this bullet. So the same way you can go with the other plays. So with this, you can use this against tanks. You can use this against high health tanks to limit their potential in a fight, because you're now doing this. If you have any type of CC on your team, if I have an ETC, a taunt variant, a Diablo that just wallbang somebody and flip them over, these are the people that I want to approach, right? I don't want to raw open up with this. Ideally, every damage dealer is going to try and follow up their tank CC. But if you have a stationary target and you can Cursed Bullet, go in, worgen form, and then start tearing them apart, you can do 60 to 70% damage on your own. But if you have a stationary target, because of CC, those are the priority targets you should be looking at for Cursed Bullet. You can use it on a squishy. You can use it like somebody's walking away, they're at 50% health. You can Cursed Bullet, then hop into worgen form. There's so many different ways you can use Cursed Bullet to try and help secure a kill. It doesn't necessarily always have to be on a 100% health target. It can be on a 50% health target. If there's a 50% tank standing in front of you, that's 40% of their damage. All of a sudden, they're down much lower. And then you can start to look, and your team should have enough damage to get through that. Again, both of these are good. I think they're both situational on the enemy team. And go for the throat. Just remember, it puts you in that worgen form, which is always a little bit tough. Level 13, I think there's two really good options here. Now, Running Wild is pretty much the go-to for a lot of people. Increases Dark Flight and Disengage range, which means that you can now engage on squishy targets much easier. That also means you're deeper into the enemy team. But also the disengage part, and I mentioned that with going Eyes in the Dark, is that you can go in, and so now you can disengage further out. So now you're further out of safety, and you have that stealth mode for a few. But this also gives you the engage and disengage you're looking for. So a lot of these things can really work in your favor to try and get in there. If you know you're going to have a team, you can play a little bit more aggressive. You can consider things like On the Prowl. If Inner Beast increases movement speed by 3 seconds, as long as it's been active, or by 30%, as long as it's been active for 3 seconds, which means that you can now work on that A moving, right? So if you're in human form, you can use this. If there's a lot of skill shots, there's certain heroes you want to stay away from. As long as this has been active for 3 seconds, which for all intents and purposes, your Inner Beast should be active for more than 3 seconds, you can use this in human form, or you can use this in worgen form, and it allows you to play the game a little bit different than you would otherwise. I really think Running Wild is always going to be the pick for a lot of people, and I don't blame them. Getting that engage range is part of the appeal. The disengage range is also very much part of the appeal, so it's just a fantastic talent. The increased movement speed can be there. As far as Unfettered Assault, they've buffed this I don't know how many times. The lunge distance of swipe is increased, and basic attacks reduce Razor Swipe's cooldown. For what it's worth, single target damage, as long as Inner Beast is active, will always, not always, but mathematically can be stronger, because if you're auto-attacking, your auto-attack speed is very high. And in that situation, you're going to say, all right, do I need to swipe here? It's the same way as single target damage on a boss, right? You don't necessarily need to swipe unless your Inner Beast is down. Your attack speed is so high that swipe doesn't necessarily complement it as much, and you would need to auto-Q auto very quickly, and it doesn't necessarily work the same way you thought. So those two talents at 13 are going to be the pick. 16, again, this is normally going to be the pick. You should generally have somebody slowed, rooted, or stunned on your team. Go back to the earlier example I had on Cursed Bullet and or Go for the Throat or whatever. Your tank slides in, or your tank stuns somebody, your tank slows somebody, and you open with Cursed Bullet. Now all of a sudden you open with Cursed Bullet, you now hop in instantly into worgen form. By the way, you should always try and Q before you hop in, before you press E. If your Q's on cooldown and you hop in, unless you're instantly going for a kill, that extra little bit of damage does help. and you should be able to QE quickly. If you don't feel comfortable there, just press E. You don't always have to press Q, but you should. Same for hopping on a camp, right? You should always Q before you E in. But getting the 30% extra basic attack damage means that your opening now is infinitely stronger, and you get 3 seconds of this. Again, you don't have to go into worgen form, but you can go into worgen form. Executioner is always going to be good. This is good on a lot of heroes. There's different variations on different heroes. Again, if you want to be super greedy, you have the movement speed, you have the increased range, the attack speed of Inner Beast by 40% if it's been active for 4 seconds, which is 1 second longer than the movement speed requirement. This can be really, really, really good. If you're on a boss late game and you've done this, like, nobody matches up to the damage that you're doing. It's insane. But you have to assume the enemy team has some CC. If they have no CC, you can probably be more liberal with your picks. But against normal team comps, this is a pretty greedy pick. Does it have a very high ceiling? Absolutely. This could be good. I think Executioner's kind of hard to go away from because of the amount of bonus damage you're going to get. Alpha Killer, as appealing as this is, again, you're not going to stay in worgen form enough to get value out of this. And if you are, it's because the enemy team drafted really bad and they have no CC to punish you for being in worgen form. Or you have amazing support like a Divine Shield and a Sanctification. I don't know. But even then, 3% of that versus the amount of damage you're going to get from here or here is normally not as good. Plus, you're in worgen form. Level 20, they just buffed every one of these talents, so it's kind of hard to base the value out of this. I can tell you one thing, Tooth and Claw. I've heard some people say this is good, although in practice, again, you're still in worgen form. And again, I think this is a very circumstantial pick. And I'm getting this out of the way because I want to say it is circumstantial. Hunter's Blunderbuss has been the de facto pick for a very long time. The increased attack range already helps. Now all of a sudden you're getting Inner Beast active, you're in human form, and you're getting 100% splash damage. This is now even more justification of why you should consider staying in human form more than you already are. I've covered that many times over. You should be in human form more than you already are. This now gives you incredible splash damage. It gives you a lot of cool stuff to do. You can use this on minions. Those minions die incredibly fast. You don't even have to use Inner Beast around those minions. And sometimes if you're trying to keep it alive, you have to slow down your own auto attacks and stall out those autos. Hunter's Blunderbuss, you can never go wrong with this. Now, Lana Roulette is something I haven't seen a lot of yet because Cursed Bullet, you do 40% on 30 seconds. This is 30% every 20 seconds. You should be able to get this out 2 times in a fight. A fight would last around 20 seconds, but remember, you're also going to be assuming you're not dead or you're in human form or finding a way to get into human form here. Lana Roulette, I'm not a big fan of this. The old one was always so difficult. This does help, and I think it's very good for certain maps, like Volskaya, different things where you're going to have longer standoffs. But I think in general, it gets surpassed by Hunter's Blunderbuss and other things. Here's the big Pog play. Unleashed, Go for the Throat's damage is increased by 25%, which makes it strong, even stronger. This also refunds the mana and resets the cooldowns of all of your abilities, not just your heroics. So now all of a sudden, it just resets your abilities. So now you can use several abilities and make some insane plays. I don't even want to go over the variables on this. This is just if you feel you're about to pog out and you've been dominating a team and you want to make the biggest plays and you've been playing Greymane a while, because if you haven't played Greymane a while, I don't know if this is what you want to do. But this is how you make big pog plays. I don't recommend it if you're still learning Greymane or you're still trying to figure out how to do damage as Greymane. Greymane very much is an A-move auto attack hero with the ability to be the ultimate killer. And I think that's where a lot of people really struggle with Greymane to figure out, when do I engage, when should I not engage, and why is my build not working, and why am I doing less damage? It's because you're an opportunist as Greymane. Can you do a lot of single target damage? Absolutely. Can you stay in a fight for a long time because you get 10 armor when you hop into worgen form? Yep. Can you also just stand there and auto attack the tank's face off because you have increased range and your Inner Beast is active and make his life miserable? Absolutely. Can you now try and use this you are not the hard carry in a lot of teams because of this. You want to make sure you pair this. You can pair this with a mage that can do burst damage so that you can be the executioner. You can pair this with a Lunara who's going to whittle people down so that you can also get there. It is a little bit slower play style, but you have different ways of utilizing this with the right team. If you have good single target CC, like an ETC and a root or a stun or any type of follow-up, Cursed Bullet, and then going in and absolutely obliterating people, one of the highest single target damage combos you can do in the game. These are things you have to play around. You cannot, look, there's Greymane players out there that can do things nobody else can. But for the general population, you are not the carry. I'm setting up a play. I'm finishing a play. I'm doing all this by myself. You are an opportunist who's going to look for the opening to make the plays, but those plays that you normally see where, oops, fight started, time to hop into worgen form, you're doing it wrong. 99% of the time, you're probably doing it wrong. If you go into worgen form and you open in a fight with worgen form and they're at 90, 100% health, let me know how that works for you. If the team drafted terribly against you or they just can't hit abilities, sure, it's going to look good. We've all made those plays, but that doesn't mean that's the right way. And I think that a lot of people struggle in terms of doing more damage. And I can't stress this enough. Human form and Inner Beast is the way to play this safely, and it's also a way to play it properly so that you can now start to ramp your stats up, start to find your niche, then start to experiment with what can I get away with? How far can I toe the line? And as much as I could say every circumstance, you kind of have to figure that out yourself in terms of what heroes can I afford to go into. Garrosh, Diablo, am I going to get thrown around? At Johanna, am I going to get blinded? Is there an Arthas on the other team? When can I go in? And that's a very hard question to ask. But overall, I should say you should probably go in less, and that's the situation you should go in. One thing that I have noticed in terms of some abilities, one thing you should always remember is that they actually nerfed this quite some time ago in worgen form. Razor Swipe used to be much more often. Now it's 4 seconds. I believe it used to be 3. The reason I want to bring that up is because this used to be a great disengage tool. Because once you go into worgen form, you can go in, you can swipe, and then 3 seconds later you could swipe again. And I say swipe because it's a small lunge. And you, instead of lunging in, you can now lunge out. And it's the same thing for playing against different heroes, is that you can now go in, razor swipe, get some damage in, get your auto swipe, and then you can use that Q out. And if you're 1 second away, you want to try and juke as much as you can, swipe, then E. That way you get a small lunge and your disengage, which puts more distance between you and the enemy team. And a lot of players, you'll see, they'll be impatient. They'll be like half second left. I see this way too often when I casted some of the games, is that they weren't using that Q to make sure and get that extra lunge before they E'd. Same thing is, you got to be careful when you engage with your abilities. There's a weird thing that if you go in with your E as Greymane, your auto obviously is going to go in, but it's like you want to go in auto Q auto essentially when you go in, especially if you're Inner Beast up. So these are things that you want to look for when you engage into worgen form. So those are different things to play around in order to play Greymane. And that's it. Don't forget to also, if you get somebody low and they go to tap, aim towards that. If you can kind of still see them, you know where to throw that cocktail. But if you get somebody low, you can disengage, then throw a cocktail, splash it over the wall, aim towards that well. That's normally where they're going to be because you've hurt them.